So let's move on from liberty and talk about markets. Markets is any place where somebody wants something and somebody wants to provide something. Now we think of markets as areas or arenas like the electronic, stock market where you can trade, or a market like a supermarket or a flea market where people have goods and services for sale and you buy and stuff like that. Now it can be that, but in a more broader sense, when we talk about markets, and really in that sense too, a market is where somebody wants something, and somebody wants to give it to them. Everything, there is a market for everything. Everything is a market. Everything is a market. There's a market for everything. And people seem to think that certain products, certain services, and certain industries do not operate within markets. And the big ones are education, healthcare, retirement, and human activity. People think that these areas don't, I should say certain human activities. People believe that these areas are not subject to markets and the forces within markets. And it leads to a lot of bad assumptions and a lot of confusion and coercion. When we want to educate our children, somebody wants to provide education for those children. That's a market. And the area of education will be subject to the same forces within markets, whether we want to admit it or not. Markets have proven where there's competition, multiple providers of services, quality for consumers goes up and price goes down. But somehow we think that we can reduce suppliers in the education field and quality will remain high and cost will remain low. And then we see cost high and we see quality low, and we don't believe that markets will change that. This goes into every element of society. This computer I'm on, there was a market for it. Pillows, there's a market for pillows. For carpet, for shoes, for cars, for paper plates. There's a market for everything, including some of the darker areas of life. Unfortunately, life is not perfect. Everyone is not wildly happy with their lot in life, and people seek to alter their state of mind through substances. People want substances that will alter their mood and alter their state of mind. And that's a sad thing for the most part, but it's true. And so people that believe in markets, I bash the liberals on the education market. Some of the conservatives, some of them sort of have that concept down, that education is not exempt from the forces of the market. But the conservatives are just as guilty because they try to believe that these darker areas of life, markets don't exist in these areas. And it's hard for people to look themselves in the mirror, in the face, and look at their neighbors and look at society and say these people want this. It's easier for some people to pretend like nobody wants to be messed up on drugs. But we are. People do. It's a sad state. But what you have to do is deal with reality. People want to alter their mood. People want to alter their frame of mind. And when they're not able to do so naturally, they turn to substances. So the hard cold fact of the world is that people want to obtain substances that will change their mind and alter their mood. And people want to provide people with substances that will alter their mood, change their state of mind. So there's a market, and we call these drugs. There's a market for drugs. There is. Now this will be a free market, or this will be a market marked by violence and coercion. Which one will it be? Right now we've chosen violence and coercion. There's a market for human interaction. People like to interact with one another. Now this goes into a whole realm, a whole mess of worms, talking about marriage and everything else, and how we exchange, goods and services for the things that we want in the realm of human interaction. But specifically, humans crave sexual interaction with one another. And when this need isn't satisfied through more traditional avenues, such as marriage and things like this, people turn to more direct forms of obtaining the interaction. We call this prostitution. I'm going to say it. Okay? And people act like there's no market for people selling their bodies and men or women, paying for this interaction that they don't get elsewhere. But guess what? There is. There are people wanting sexual interaction, and there are people willing to provide sexual interaction. And so you have a market. Is that market going to be a free market? Or is that market going to be marked by violence and coercion? Everything is a market. Education is a market. Does anybody want their child educated? Yes. There's a market. Everything is a market. There's a market for human body parts. Will that market be free? Or will that market be violence and coercion? There is a market for everything. Education is a market. Healthcare is a market. Do people want to be taken care of? Do people want to take care of people? Yes, there's a market, whether you like it or not. Healthcare, education, retirement, drugs, and sex are not exempt from the forces of markets, regardless of how bad liberals want certain ones of those items to be free from, and how bad conservatives want other others of those items to be free from market forces. They're not. There's markets for everything, including those hot button issues that nobody wants to admit to.